Hi there, I'm Evan Lahti.
And I'm Cory Banks.
We both played the beginning of the Elder Scrolls Online's closed beta over this past weekend, haven't we, Cory?
We did. We put in quite a few hours.
Yeah, 4 or 5, 6 hours, something like that each. And we're here to talk about how we feel about that so far, this introductory stage of the game. And our impression actually isn't that positive.
Not really. What did you think?
Right now. So, I was a huge Skyrim player, a huge Oblivion player. I didn't play a lot of Morrowind. And I feel like, there's really like a magic missing to the game, right? In general, it sort of feels like, it's sort of a game designer's nightmare, right? To like adapt a beloved single-player experience that's very intimate, very polished, there's a certain amount of emergent gameplay in Skyrim and Oblivion. We were stumbling into dungeons and things like that, and the specific encounters you have, like we were stealing stuff from people's houses, and a lot of that stuff seems to be stripped out.
Right.
Because it's a massively multiplayer game.
Yeah. When you're making an MMO, you're building the illusion of an open world as opposed to an actual open world. And I feel like it was possibly an impossible barrier to get past. Like, you have to be able to create an Oblivion-like experience or a Skyrim-like experience where you can go and do anything you want, but also keep the player reined in so that they're doing the same thing that other people are doing and everybody coexists really well. And somewhere in the middle of that mess, we have the Elder Scrolls Online, which only seems like it's an open world on the surface. And once you dig just a little bit beneath that, it really looks like an MMO that's on rails. It has you following a track. Like the biggest complaint, the first complaint that I had, very early, like a half an hour in, is that all of the quests felt very much like MMO quests, which is not something that you're used to in an Elder Scrolls game. Like, I had an expectation that I'd be able to step out of whatever little training, newbie part of it would throw you into, and then just run off and explore.
Right, and that's not the case.
Not at all.
You do, depending on what faction you're in, you do begin in a different starting zone after you finish the first opening escape from a prison level, which is like, that's within the Elder Scrolls template, I guess, but also felt kind of uninteresting to me, but whatever. It's like the opening half hour, you get through that.
Sure.
Like for my character, I was a Nord, so I washed up on the shore of this island outside of Skyrim, this like small island. I was helping these villagers prepare to leave their village basically and migrate because they were about to be raided by another faction.
Right.
And I played for 5 or 6 hours or something, and I was still just honestly waiting for an interesting quest, like an interesting, compelling, funny, like stealthy
hook.
That's
something in Skyrim or Oblivion would grab you and start dragging you towards, we'll go and explore this area.
Exactly.
Like, the moment you leave the sewers in Oblivion, like, you're given a very specific place to run to, and then you suddenly get embroiled in events. This felt very forced. I started a High Elf character. I was playing a High Elf Templar, which was kind of a weird mix. But ended up, after the prison sequence, in the Cat Town, the Khajiit town.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a similar story to what you were dealing with. There was a big hurricane. People had been washed ashore. There were sea elf pirates that were raiding things, and there was events that were happening there that were supposed to drag me through the area and help me explore, but it really felt like I was just jumping from one nav point to another.
Yeah, same here. I played probably 3 or 4 variations on someone just asking me to find these 3 people that are kind of scattered equidistantly from the central point. I just walk up, I walk toward the nav point, I find them on the map, I press the E key, and I go to the next one. And it's, I don't know.
Didn't matter what they were saying.
That's so antithetical to like the deliberate movement I do when I'm in Skyrim, where like I see a tower, I see a bandit guard post, and I'm like, okay, what? I'm like sizing it up. Okay, am I going to approach it this way? Am I going to come in loud? Am I going to come in swinging? And none of that really mattered.
Right.
There is a stealth system where, like Skyrim, like Oblivion, you can sort of hit the crouch key, and there's detection, and it's sort of like, if you're approaching someone behind, you do bonus damage. That's in the game. That's nice, but it's definitely not as nuanced. And I feel like a lot of those like granular details, especially in the world, right? We can talk about the world and the art and how that's represented, kind of have like a really significant impact on the experience. there's a lot of, there's like a lot of gathering you can do in the world of materials. It seems like it's really going to be a really rich crafting game if that's a way that you like to play MMOs. But I mean, just the fact that when I'm walking around in Skyrim or Cyrodiil in the single player versions of the franchise, and a butterfly just kind of moves past me, and I could like grab it for like crafting materials or alchemy materials or something. But in this game, in Elder Scrolls Online, there's like, that's the case, but those insects are just static.
There's a butterfly, and it's in one spot, and it's not moving.
Yeah, they're locked in place, and like
it's like it might as well be a mining node.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like, oh, whatever. It's just like some insignificant thing in the environment, but it really has, even when you're in first person, this impact of like disconnecting you from the experience because you're walking by and you're like, that's not going to go anywhere. You don't feel like this is an authentic world.
Yeah,
I don't know.
let's talk a little bit about the interface, because it's interesting how it does feel like it's Skyrim or an Elder Scrolls game grafted on top of an MMO. Like you can play first person.
Yeah. You
can play first or third, and they both have their uses. Combat is driven by, just like in Skyrim, like you would hit a key and you'd bring up your sword and shield or your spells or your staff. But that experience still feels like an MMO even when you go up to a monster and you swing at it, right? You may feel like you're swinging in real time, but there's a delay there where the server's kind of registering what you've done to the monster. Same thing with throwing projectiles. Same thing with the stealth system. Like it looks like Skyrim when you hit control and you go into stealth mode and your HUD turns into like an eye, but it doesn't feel like Skyrim.
Sure.
And that's one of the big concerns that I have, because I don't want this to feel like World of Warcraft or like EverQuest. I don't want to be working through a series of systems.
Yeah.
I want to live and exist in that world.
Certainly. And again, I think we empathize, honestly, with the game designers, because they have this impossible task of representing like those very fine and specifically balanced aspects of the game in a context where there are hundreds of people, in an instance potentially.
Yeah.
And how do you maintain that level of quality for all those people at the same time, while adding all this content, while adding different factions and how they interact and things like that. So it's super tough job.
It is. And it's not all negative. Like there was some stuff that I liked. Definitely the feeling of wandering around this world and like seeing this kind of revised art style. Like everything compared to like Skyrim is very illustrated here, which gives it an almost cartoony presence, but grounds it within the world. So I do like the way everything looks. And you mentioned the crafting. Like I am kind of a crafting nut in MMOs, and I'm really excited about this.
It seems like there are just a ton of items and ingredients for you to play with. It seems like that's going to be a very deep system. Whatever you feel like specializing in, if you want to make clothes or armor, if you want to make beer and things like that.
Right.
It seems
There's
like
a whole provision skill that's just about making beer in the game.
Yeah, and hey,
I'll spend a lot of time doing that.
I see how it is.
Yeah.
So they got the lockpicking game, mini game. Right.
Yeah, what did you think about that?
I found it very difficult, which was actually really good for me.
Yeah.
I failed it a lot over and over and over again. And I was still figuring it out as I stopped playing over the weekend, but that's great.
There was also like a scarcity of lockpicks to just find.
Yeah.
You could always go to a merchant and buy some more, which that's fine if you want to do that. But what I remember the most about the Elder Scrolls games is just finding lockpicks laying around everywhere. And so I always had plenty of opportunity to practice. I ran out of lockpicks this time. And I'm not saying that as a complaint. Like, that's good. I need those kind of limitations when I'm playing a game like this.
Sure. But yeah, like back to combat. I mean, there are some aspects of it that I like. Like, the best MMO I've played recently, in the past couple years, I guess, in terms of action-based combat, is DC Universe Online, which has had terrific animations, like, they really sunk their teeth into the movement abilities, the natural movement abilities of superheroes, and like vaulting and wall climbing and web swinging and stuff like that. And I do like the first-person perspective. I feel like it's a little narrow in terms of FOV, so I sort of found myself going back and forth. It was nice to have it there as an option.
It felt strange to me to not play in first person. Like, because I had that level of Skyrim and Oblivion on top of this, I wanted it to feel like those games. Every time I switched to third person and tried to play it like a traditional MMO, I thought that was strange. It didn't feel as natural, which is odd. I don't normally play MMOs that way at all.
Yeah.
So I like the first person. I get what you're saying about the FOV, and I hope there's an option to adjust that, as there is in most other first person shooters.
Yeah.
Really liked the skills and the leveling. that's involved here, because it's not, you're choosing a class and that's going to dictate some of the skill trees that you can choose from, but there are also, like, weapons are divided into different skill trees as well. So one-hand weapon and shield is a whole tree of things that you can then apply skill points into. Two-handed dual wielding. I don't feel as limited in the kind of equipment that I'm going to have in this game as I have in previous MMOs. It is more limited than in Skyrim, but it seems like a happy mix between those two.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance, because I only leveled my character to about 5 or so. I didn't get to dig too deeply into those skill trees yet. But just going through and looking at what options are available there, like, there's going to be a lot to do. And it was also cool, like, it felt like this was, they baked this in for exploration purposes, but you can go around and collect pickups that will, every 3 of them will give you an additional skill point.
Yeah.
Sky shards, I think they called them.
Yeah.
And I like that. I don't want to have to wait till I level every single time to add new points or try customizing new abilities. So that's going to give me more incentive to explore.
Yeah, it didn't feel unusual to me to be playing. I was playing as a melee character to like be deploying, hotbar abilities in Skyrim, a game that hasn't had that in the past. I mean,
that felt very MMO-y to me, but I don't have like 15 hotkey abilities in front of me like in World of Warcraft. So that felt like an interesting mix as well.
It's a big open question for me, just how exploration is going to play out in like the mid and later game, because it seems like so far, I mean, the early game might be deceiving, we'll see, but like things are very intentionally linear and sort of bottlenecked, where this is the zone you're in this chapter and you can only leave it once you complete the main quest line, or you're at least very discouraged or like softly prevented from doing so because there's this like higher level mob sitting at the end that like you have to cross through this zone that's just filled with really tough enemies that you can't handle until you reach a certain point.
Yeah.
So
whereas in Skyrim, like, you'd run into those higher level monsters, but you could still run around that world, right?
Yeah.
Being locked off into zones, for lack of a better word, that feels very much like a massively multiplayer game, and that's a trope that I kind of wish hadn't carried over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the essential Elder Scrolls experience that's missing for me, that I haven't had yet in Elder Scrolls Online, is just being in the environment, seeing a dungeon, seeing a door, seeing a sewer grate or something, and just saying like, oh, I'm gonna stop what I'm doing and just being distracted and having permission to jump in there. I haven't encountered any of those zones yet, and that really worries me.
Yeah.
I don't know if they exist, in the Elder Scrolls Online, and I really hope they do, because that's sort of an essential experience of like diving down this content rabbit hole and just sort of seeing how far it goes. Is this going to be half an hour that I just spend in killing bandits or killing skeletons or something, and like seeing what the mini boss is at the end of this. So yeah, that's a big thing that I'm waiting for.
I'm excited about the concept of exploring the world and learning more about the lore of the Elder Scrolls, because, like you said, it's one of the better fantasy franchises out there. But I don't want to do it just by running from nav point to nav point and having dialogue force-fed to me. I appreciate that there's a lot of voice acting and that it's all really well done.
Yeah, that helps.
But that's not how I explore these worlds. I'm looking for something a little more emergent. And maybe there'll be more of that when the servers are more populated, when you can just group up with people and run off and see what you can do. Over these beta weekends, we haven't had as much opportunity to try that because the server populations have been lower. So I'm still hopeful there, but I'm waiting for that exploration feel.
So those are our thoughts on the Elder Scrolls Online after playing this past weekend in the closed beta. It's fair to say that we're not really feeling too good about it so far, to be honest, but we've only played a small portion of the game, so we are very hopeful that it's going to get better in the mid-game. We're going to have a chance to play PvP next weekend, so hopefully be doing some coverage of that. But yeah, I mean, I think there are just some inherent challenges to taking a franchise that's beloved as a single-player experience and making it massively multiplayer. I mean, our own expectations about what that experience should be play against that, and it's sort of a series of compromises in some ways, and some of those are good, smart compromises, and some of those in terms of like exploration and the combat system and how the combat feels and how stealth feels are just inherently a little bit watered down. So
that said, it's early days on the game. We've only played up to level 5, and it could be that the game opens up once we get past that point. So
yeah, so we're a little pessimistic or skeptical right now, but wait and see. Let us know in the comments what you guys think of the footage we've shown in this video, and if you're planning on subscribing to The Elder Scrolls Online when it releases later this year. Thanks for watching.